Hi, good morning. Thank you for joining us this Saturday morning. Our program today and this weekend is meant to launch our series of events in line with the Museums and Galleries Month this October. Um, it is also a collateral event for our ongoing exhibition, Synergy of Ventures, which you can view at the ground floor galleries. Um, Obviously, you know who you came for this morning. And do I need to introduce? But yes, we will. Our guest speaker for today is actually a native of Ateneo de Manila University, a Filipino public historian, academic, cultural administrator, journalist, author, and independent curator. Ambeth Ocampo is known for his definitive writings about the Philippines' national hero, or one of our national heroes, Jose Rizal, and on topics in Philippine history and Philippine art through his bi-weekly editorial page column, Looking Back. Um, he is also one of our benefactors here in the Ateneo Art Gallery, um, and has shared his collection and will be sharing his collection permanently through a bequest later. We recently featured some works from Ambeth's collection in an exhibition we mounted on women, Matrix 2, which featured works by women artists from the collection and from his collection. So this talk on Fernando Zóbel, as mentioned, is in line with the ongoing exhibition at the ground floor. And we first featured this. It was part of the Art Fair Philippines program. And this iteration will include more of the works from the Ateneo collection. Um, we also would like to invite you to view while you're in the building, on campus, view the other exhibitions later, namely Mauro Malang Santos drawings and the Ateneo Art Awards 2025 at the third floor gallery. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ambeth Ocampo.
Is working. Mic test. Okay, good. Um, some people have probably heard this lecture before. It was already given at Art Fair, but of course, each time you talk, it becomes different. I'm going to talk about Fernando Zóbel and how he taught me how to see. And I hope that by talking about him today, it will put his collection downstairs into context. I hope you will go and visit the exhibition in the ground floor because most of the Zóbel collection is normally in storage. So it's the first one of the few times where we will actually have most of it up. So it is a treat to go and see it. So basically, again, I will talk, well, I don't need to, I'll just go straight. My talk has only very four basic points. One is that we have to rediscover Zóbel. Unfortunately, when you say Fernando Zóbel today, you think of his grandnephew rather than him. And so we have to go back and see the original Fernando Zóbel. Then we will go into his teaching at what went into making the Ateneo Art Gallery. As you know, the Zóbel collection is the core of the Ateneo Art Gallery and has grown from it. But why this is significant is something I want to talk about today. Because Zóbel is an integral part of modern art in the Philippines. He came at the right time and was at the right place. And we see in this bequest and in this museum what he left for us. And then basically I will talk about his legacy. So there's a lot, because this is Zóbel's 100th anniversary. There's a lot of exhibitions. There was one in the Prado. There was one in the National Gallery of Singapore. There's one here in the Ateneo, and one in the Ayala Museum. In the past, I think, decade or two, Fernando Zóbel has come out of the woodwork. He used to be seen like a Sunday painter, but now they actually see how important he is. And the fact that he is the first modern to actually be exhibited in the Prado is something that that shows how important he is. And there's a lot of literature, if you're interested in how difficult to read academic material. They talk about how he's transnational, translocal, because he was born in Manila, educated in the Spain and the US, worked in Manila for a while, moved to Spain, and then he died in Rome. So you have somebody who was at home, not just in his space, but also in other places of the world. So my area actually, and which is why I want to go to Madrid to look at his papers, it's his Philippine period that I want to look into, because it's not so much the work, but it is what he wrote and what he wanted us to see. So Rediscovering Zóbel, I wasn't a fan in the beginning. He's an acquired taste. You sort of learn to like him after a while. But 2 years ago, I was in Madrid, and I found out that curators from Ayala and the National Gallery of Singapore were going to Cuenca to visit the museum. So, and we were pleased, because when you go there today, the train station is called Cuenca Fernando Zóbel. So this is me and Patrick Flores of the National Gallery of Singapore. And then it was the time when it was closing, the Prado exhibition was closing. So this was staff from the Ayala Museum that went to look at the show. The best iteration, they say, was the Manila one, because the Prado one was basically Zóbel in Spain. The one in Singapore makes him out to be more international, but the Philippine one, because most of the material was here, actually sets him into his beginnings and why he became what he became. And so it became a show also in the Ayala, so they just translated it into English, the future of the past, and it shows you how important he is. So again, abstract art is an acquired taste, and when you actually look at Zóbel's work, when you see something like this, you just look at it, it's wonderful in itself, but again, it should be seen in dialogue with something that Zóbel was interested in. So in this case, he teaches us not just to see a painting, but to see context and to see dialogue. So in this case, this painting was based on a still life from the Prado Museum. So when you look at it, you can at least recognize the little donut, but it shows you how something goes from the figurative into the abstract. Zóbel's art is very cerebral, literally cerebral. And I like to think that much of his art actually comes from his reading. Something that we rarely do today, because we have too many distractions. But in Cuenca, they sort of reconstructed part of his library. His studio and his library was all white, very obsessive compulsive. So even his brushes are hung in a particular way. And Arturo Luz used to tell me even the floors were white. So it's very clinical. And somebody once asked him, you have white walls, white ceiling, white floor. What happens when it gets dirty? Then Zóbel says, then we paint it white again. But you can see how very organized he is. So when I went to the library, so people just go. It's a beautiful space to look at. But when you look at the actual shelves, you actually see the furniture of his mind, what he was reading and what these things inform you with. So there was a small shelf on pottery. And as you know, in the Zóbel Calatagan property, Fernando Zóbel, they funded an archaeological expedition that brought out, the Calatagan grave complex in the 1950s and 1960s. And Zóbel was, I'm sorry, it's not very clear. I stole this from the video. But you can see this is his actual shelves, and it's not just books. He would put little things in them. And here you can see he tried to play the recorder, not very good at music. And then he would put objects together. So again, it's not random. The way in which you put objects in also shows you a sense of order. No? And there are two particular things that are interesting to me. These are Yuan period 13th century ceramic that is found in the Philippines. And he was interested in many things. No? As a collector, he collected not just art, he collected books, he collected canvases, sculptures, seals. And again, maybe because he could afford it, but again, when you look at it, especially in the age of the billions that are stolen by DPWH, you see where they are spending their money on. No? So it's not very edifying. But when we were there, they showed us not only his library, but they showed us his notebooks. So he had specially bound notebooks, and then he would sketch in them, write in them, and you would see bus tickets, museum tickets, everything was in it. It's a catalog of his life. And when I was looking at it, I was saying, this man did not have a smartphone. So every evening you have the time to look at your day and write about it, put things in order. And I think that's what made him what he was. So in Madrid, which is now the Fundación Juan March, the Zóbel papers are 8 meters of shelf space. And it has notebooks and diaries. It has photographs. It has albums of clippings, newspaper clippings, which as a historian, it saves me the time of looking for the newspaper and looking for the actual article. So aside from Fernando Zóbel, one of the sources for early modern art are the clipping books of Purita Calao Ledesma, which are now available in the PKL library in Makati. So she was also an avid newspaper clipping person. So when you go there, you actually get a view of what the time was like. Then there are a few videos. But what made Fernando Zóbel lively to me, although I did not meet him, although my friends tell me that you would have enjoyed each other if you had met each other, most of my stories came from Arturo Luz, who was a friend and an early, how would you say this, co-worker in the modern art vineyard. Mr. Luz, as you can see, both of them have, although this is not sense of order, no? So he also has the square boxes, but again, it shows you how organized they were. They shared many sensibilities. The reason why I remember him is one day when we were talking, Mr. Luz said, when Fernando Zóbel was starting out painting, he did not know how to prime his canvases. And I will show you why. And he got one of the 1950s abstracts. Some of them you see in the museum downstairs. He got it, and then he tapped it on the floor. And then you could see the paint fall off. And then you see he doesn't know how to do it, so he tapped it a few more times, and more paint fell. Again, it's one of the regrets of my life. I should have said, just give it to me, and I'll have it restored and fixed. But half of the painting was gone after we looked at that thing. Mr. Luz, when I was living in Japan, said, I'll give you money to buy me brushes. He says, I want you to buy me Japanese brushes. And so I went to the flea markets, I bought him, and so when I brought it home, it's like a child in a toy store. He was looking at all the different brushes. And while he was doing this, I remembered that he's normally remembered as a man whose art had a Mandarin sensibility. That's what Leonidas Benessa wrote in the 50s or 60s. And it is something that has stuck, and people don't really think about it. Mandarin meaning it's a very elevated way of doing things, but he's not Chinese. Luz is actually Japanese in sensibility. Very Zen. It is simplicity and restraint in their work. And that is what Zóbel and he shared. So they went to Japan one day. So Fernando Zóbel on the left and Luz is the guy on the third. They were looking at this calligrapher's work. And Mr. Luz says that, you know, they immersed in Japanese culture and they watched a no play. And if you've ever experienced or endured a no play, it takes about 40 minutes for the actor to get on the stage because they move very slowly. You know? So it's a Zen experience, but for people in the modern world, you get agitated waiting for the guy going. And as Luz remembers it, he says, Fernando was mesmerized and I was paralyzed. So this was the type of thing that went on. And because of calligraphy, so after looking at the brushes, Mr. Luz says, you should actually collect calligraphy. You should have at least one piece of Chinese or Japanese calligraphy because it's just black line on a white page. And these are Fernando Zóbel's attempts at trying to control the brush. And he was very frustrated that he could not get it the proper way, maybe because he was more Western. But we were looking at these things. No, he had seals that marked his calligraphic works. And when Arturo Luz had a garage sale before moving to a new house, I found in the cabinet Fernando Zóbel's chop. So it has the Zóbel thing on the top. And I said, can I have this? What will you use it for? I said, I'll use it as a paperweight. So I have it as a souvenir of what it is, or maybe we could use it to make fake calligraphic works. You know? Anyway, Zóbel was very Japanese again in sensibility. So Leandro Locsin designed a house in Forbes for him, which has since been torn down. It is now occupied, the lot is now occupied by his grandnephew, Fernando Zóbel. So as you can see, it's a Japanese-inspired house in Makati. And they had, you can see here, no, instead of paper, they used glass because of the weather, no. But he had a Zen garden. So this is a thing from the 50s, no. And then they used Philippine materials to simulate what a Japanese tea room or Japanese house is like. So again, it's that a tea room with a scroll with calligraphy, and instead of the tatami, he used sawali and other things. So this particular thing, when you look at his collection, he collected many bits of calligraphy, and he would try his hand at it. So you can see here, he was very fascinated by the use of a brush. So when I saw this, it made me understand what all these black and white paintings are. No? So they are actually, they look modern, but they are Chinese, Japanese calligraphic in form and in its content, but made in a more modern way. So to put Zóbel in context, you have to remember that he was born in Manila. He endured the war. No? So this is the Manila Post Office after the fire of 2023. And you just have to remember that that's not the first time it was burned out. No? So it was burned out in the battle for Manila in 1945. And we remember the many people who died in that war, especially the closing months of when the Japanese just killed everyone they could find. But what is often forgotten is that there were many cultural casualties of the war. So this is the National Museum of the Philippines, where almost everything was destroyed. The National Library also was in this building, so it was booby-trapped, it was bombed, it was burned. It has since been rebuilt. So when you look at it, you don't see what it looked like after the war. But many of the things actually survived, especially the library. Much of it was moved to other places and have since been found. But just to give you an idea of the devastation, this is Intramuros in 1945. And you will see that the only thing standing is San Agustin Church here. But when you look at this picture, you see that if we had the same modern conservation, we could have actually rebuilt some of the buildings, but what happened is they just razed everything to the ground. So what is left is only San Agustin. But from great tragedy, you find opportunity. John F. Kennedy used to say, wrongly, I'm told, that the Chinese use the word for crisis, and the opposite of it is supposed to be opportunity. So in every crisis, there is an opportunity. But I am told that the first character actually means danger or crisis. But the second, when you put it with the second character, it doesn't mean opportunity. It actually means a tipping point, a critical point, something, a time in which things will change, either for good or for bad. So in the post-war period, one of the architects of modern Makati was Colonel McMeeking. You have to remember that after the war, they could have rebuilt Manila. But the Zóbels and Colonel McMeeking said, we will move the commercial and business district from Escolta to Makati. And my father, who used to work with the early Ayala projects with Dave Consun, he tells me that when Fernando Zóbel showed them what Makati looked like and there was nothing, it was just grazing field. And then he says, we're going to move the commercial business district here. They could not even imagine what it was like. So this is 1900, San Pedro Makati, grazing land, not really worth much. But when they were building Forbes Park, and this is Fernando Zóbel, and you see in the back is the map of what they envisioned to be the modern Makati. In one of his letters, he talks about kawawa naman the Carabaos, no? My crews and tractors will come in and then will drive them away. And he says, in this place, there will be people who will sit in lawns drinking cold drinks. And he says, I feel sorry for the Carabaos, but they will find another mud puddle somewhere else. So when you see that, this is Makati, 1965. So this is San Antonio Church, and then this is Dasmariñas. Forbes Park is around here, and South Forbes is around there. You cannot imagine what it was like and how it became the Makati that we know today. So from the Ayala archives, this is the corner of Ayala and McKinley. So when you look at it, this is EDSA, northbound. So this is the way to BGC, and then on the left there is Ayala Avenue. So it's so you again, things we cannot imagine. So pre-war, the only thing that was really there was the airport, which is why when you go today, you go to Blackbird. That is the old Nielsen Tower, the Manila International Airport. So when you look at it, that's what it looked like. The Nielsen Tower is where that circle is. Ayala Avenue and Paseo de Rojas were the two runways of this very crude airport. And you can see, look at that, rice fields, no, all around. And I mean, when you flip it, again, this is just me, when you look at the way in which the triangle is made, that actually forms a letter A, A for Ayala, and the Ayala triangle, again, is what it is today. So it's nice to go back and look, and to look at these pioneers of how they imagined a new city to come and what that would be like. So in the letters he wrote in the 50s, he talks about he was not very happy joining the corporation. And so when he's writing, you have all the details of what he's doing. Like this one, answer long letter to foreign embassy who wants to buy a lot in our subdivision. No? And then this one I like. There was a man who wanted the water tank in front of his house removed. And then he says, I'll plant some bushes to hide the water tank, but we cannot do much. So this is the type of life that he had, the type of things that impinged into his art and his paintings. So there were the security guards wanted leave, so he has to approve that, and it doesn't seem nice when he doesn't approve it. Go over my sister's construction costs, arrange for a loan. This is Zóbel, arranging for a loan. Cannot imagine that also today. He arranged for construction of benches for the new church. So this is the growth of early Makati. He was looking for clay samples again. And you can see both his artistic side and his other more administrative thing comes out. Arranged to acquire supply of sulfate of ammonia for fertilizer. And then this one, more letters. He talks about, what his life is like. Always complaining. But this one I like a lot because it says, a man called up complaining he found a cobra in his toilet bowl. Asked him what he did, and he replied he hit snake on head, then flushed toilet. Hell of a thing to do because everyone around here thinks every worm and slug they discover is a spitting cobra. And I personally believe that the closest cobra is some 300 miles to the south. So his plumbing may plug up with snakes and things that are thrown in it. So again, between people complaining about snakes in their toilet and things, so in the evening, he actually painted. And that's when his early works came out. So again, he actually tells his friend again that they actually have their own security company. So he designed the shoulder patches. So from his friends in the States cannot imagine, that you have a little armed army because people would not move into Forbes Park because they were scared of hooks and criminals. So it's the first real gated community in that way. So it formed the basis of what we are. So looking back for Zóbel was also looking forward. Around this time, in the late 1950s, he was looking at colonial sculpture. And I think he started this craze for collecting what we call santos. But it was not just collecting. He looked at it, he read it, he studied it. He went out, and these are illustrations from his book. So he shows you how the things are constructed. He went to Ilocos. He went with some of his friends on road trips. And if you go downstairs, part of those bond paper drawings of what he saw are there. So these are particularly sad to me because I used to own them, but I traded them. So I don't know why Zóbel's little Kuan Yin Virgin was in a shop in Ermita. This one I bought from the Luz Gallery during their yearly sales. But this was it. So he taught me how to collect santos and how to see. Here he's doing Paway Church, and you see he's writing all the historical data that you will actually see today in a historical marker. He saw what we now know as the work by Esteban Villanueva, which is the Basi Revolt. And then you will see, so he's talking about the different paintings. No, this is Banta, the people going into Bantay Church. No, so you see them wearing native costumes. You see a comet in the sky. So it's a whole series, 14 paintings. It's like the Stations of the Cross, they say. But it talks about a revolt over Basi, which was being taxed. And then he talks about it. No? It was made in 1821, but it was retouched in 1950. And then he drew one of the images, no, and the costume, and you can see it here. So he was doing a lot of it. So again, when you look, you see here a mind that is very active, very curious, and very interested in many things. Part of his trip to Ilocos was also to look at this image of Santa Lucia, who's the saint we pray to for eye diseases. And you will see that she's filled up with little silver things, which are little eyes. Um, in Ermita, you used to find them, little eyes. Depends what your illness was. There's arms, there's legs, there's head. So you pin it on her. And Fernando Zóbel drew a lot of these eye images, very crudely made. And then he wrote about what it was, what he found in these silver things. So he wrote for Philippine Studies, which is the journal of the Ateneo. And he writes in the end, he says, a final remark to accompany his article on the ex votos. He says, they're as accurate as I could make them. The drawings are accurate. Under the circumstances, which included stifling heat, mosquitoes, copious perspiration, a very dark church, and a crowd of small children who apparently found our group as fascinating as we found the ex votos. And then he says, I would have preferred that we take photographs, but he says, what you see here are my notes. They contain healthy doses of my imagination, so they may or may not be accurate, but it is what he saw and what he experienced. So again, the notes are fantastic. So in this period, you had people who were collecting colonial art. Trinidad Pardo de Tavera's collection, Felipe Hidalgo's collection, Alfonso Ongpin collected Rizal things, Luis Araneta after the war collected santos from churches that were throwing them out to change them for new modern things, and most of this is now in San Agustin Museum. But the thing there was, it was also in this time when they were starting to mix the old and the new. So in the 1950s, these are pictures of American women visiting Arturo Luz's home. And you can see here, there's a Hoya in the back, and then there's a whole wall here of Santos. And then they mix things together. So there's modern art in the back, modern Asian art. Then you have a Batangas table, you have a piece of porcelain. So you would see they were already doing mix and match. So the Ateneo Gallery, before it became this building, was in a small room in Bellarmine Hall, which is nearby, and it was arranged like a sala. So when you go inside, it's like that. There's a coffee table, there's a sofa, there's a santo there. These are the two loose paintings. So it's like somebody's sala. So it was very homey, not like we have it today, very museum-like. Do not touch, do not take pictures with flash. This was a different time. And I'd like to think that this became Zóbel's teaching tools. It was his teaching aids. So he gave a course on contemporary Philippine painting, 1954 to 55, and his lecture notes are so wonderful, you can actually still use them today and teach the same course, but in your own way. And so he says, this is a course on how to look at paintings, and then he says, you will do this by seeing, by yourself, which I cannot do for you. You have to do and see. And what he says is, what they're going to do is, I want to expose you to paintings, and they must be original paintings, more original paintings than reproductions. Today we're looking at things on a screen. So what they looked at were the paintings that you will see downstairs. So he prepared those. Of necessities, the originals are available. We will concern ourselves with contemporary painting. And that's what he collected, the modern idiom which he collected. Now, this was his grading sheet. And you can see the people who were attending, Emmanuel Torres, who became an art critic, Leonides Benesa, Luz Consunji, Alice Coseteng. And when you look at it, there's Emmanuel Torres, there's Alice Coseteng, who was, I think, one of his brighter students, because in the end, he actually says, I have not received a paper from Ms. Coseteng. On the basis of her excellent previous record, I'd be prepared to grant it without a final paper, and gave her a good grade. No? So, and as we know, she wrote about modern art, and she also wrote 2 monographs, one on Spanish churches and the other on Philippine modern art and its critics. So again, you could see even in the way that he was teaching how wonderful his classes were probably like. But his writings and his collection actually teach us many things. Before we had this building, the Ateneo Art Gallery used to be in the ground floor of the old Rizal Library, which is periodicals and Xeroxing. And it was a small room. You would have to knock in the secretary of Mr. Torres, then they'll open the door, you sit inside this sala, and they open the lights. They couldn't even keep the lights open all the time. And my favorite paintings were this one, Fernando Zóbel's Carosa, and the other favorite I had was this one. It's Sarimanok by Fernando Ocampo, which you will see downstairs. Not properly lit, actually, because I remember one of the delights was I was the only one in the gallery, so I would spend whole afternoons there. It's cold, you can sleep, nobody sees you. But when they switched on the light, this Ocampo would actually sparkle. So in a way, experiencing the work that he had collected taught me how to see. And you will see from his syllabus, he was talking about what is Philippine art, what is modern art, and who are the people that we should look at. And the people he looked at were Arturo Luz, Hernando Ocampo, and Vicente Manansala. This is 1954, long before these 3 people became expensive commodities in the auction market. So when you look at his collection, he had some amor solos. Surprisingly, of course, a portrait, usual dalaga, diba? A drawing and some illustrations. This is when you look at it, he collected painters who later became national artists of the Philippines. So you have Aguilar Alcuaz, very nice, the gazing bird. He collected Ang Kyuko, and you can see again Ang doing Chinese brush work, and then later becoming more abstract here on the right. He collected Abdul Mari Imao, who later also became national artist. Then Hoya, you will see these paintings downstairs, especially this huge Granadian arabesque. So these are the types of things that he collected. Legazpi, just a small one, called Dark Forest. Of course, Luz is the most that and you can see Luz going from the figurative here until it becomes more abstract there. So there's a lot of Luz in his actual collection, so including drawings, prints, etc. He also collected Manansala. So you can see again, jeepneys, churches. It's things that they were doing in the 1950s. Still lifes with fish again, which is the staple of the Philippines simply because we are an archipelagic country. Then there's J. Elizalde Navarro. He collected, and of course H.R. Ocampo. That some of the early works that we see. So when I was counting, it looks like he had collected 10 of the 17 national artists for the visual arts. These are represented, and actually it's 11 if we add Bencab, who was not really collected by Zóbel. He was already in Spain, but he left a fund to acquire more art, and the then curator Eric Torres bought these 2 small Bencab. Early Bencab paintings. We actually find this is Bencab here, and this is Zóbel. So they met when they were in Spain. It's also interesting because the names of the Makati streets are Fernando Zóbel's idea. That's why you have very organized things. No, if you look at Magallanes, Lapu-Lapu, what's his name? Magallanes is Magellan. So all the streets there have something to do with the Magellan expedition, the names of the ships, the names of the people who were there. And then you have Urdaneta village. All the streets there are all the street names of old Intramuros. No? And then he did Forbes and Dasma, which were the trees that grew there. So you have Banaba, Molave, etc. But it's in San Lorenzo village that he used the names of artists and musicians, literature. So you had paintings from Malantic to Edades, then you had literature, no, and even people who were still alive. I mean, Nick Joaquin was still alive, and yet they gave him already a street. Tolentino, Amorsolo, Edades, they were still alive, but he named streets after them. Nakpil also. But when you look, you will actually see that from the roster of painters, 3 became national artists, and then from the literature, 1 became national artist, and architecture, another one. So I'd like to think that when you go downstairs and you look, you will realize that time has vindicated Zóbel's choices. But if you want to see what you should buy in the next auction, these are the people who are not yet national artists for the visual arts, but when you look, again, Lee Aguinaldo, Antonio, Austria, these were his choices. So if you want a guide into what to buy while they are cheap, this is what to look at. So aside from Philippine art, he also gave a collection of prints. We have some on exhibit below, no? Domie, Degas, Picasso, Miro, it's all there. So again, to teach people. So the Zóbel collection is something that shows you his inclusions and his exclusions. So please go downstairs and look at it and read the text that when you go inside Zóbel, when he donated, he says, I want the Ateneo to have full freedom in the use of these paintings. So there were no restrictions made. So these are the Zóbel collection downstairs. So again, he was talking about modern art after the war. And in 1953, there was a special edition of this Hispanic World where it was the Philippines, 500 years of Philippine culture. So somebody wrote about UST, somebody wrote about a bibliographer, somebody wrote about education, Spanish theater in 1952, and he wrote Modern Painting in the Philippines. The illustration is actually a procession by Luz. So it is this writing and this painting. So when you look at him, this is him very young, wearing the wildest shirts you can imagine. But when you look at it, I was so amused because when I look, this is so interesting. Zóbel wears wild shirts. And then this is Hernando Ocampo, plain white shirt, but his curtains naman are wild, no? So it's something that, again, when you look at picture, and maybe that's why you learn how to see, no? So you also have to put them in the context of the modern art movement. In 1948, they had the first national art exhibition, and the judges were Emilio Aguilar Cruz, Victorio Edades, Francesco Monti, and Amorsolo. And the winners were mostly moderns. Botong Francisco, Demetrio Diego, Vicente Manansala, Legazpi Lorenzo, and Hernando Ocampo. Which shows you, again, that Amorsolo even judged this. And so he did not choose the conservative one. So this was the first one, 1948. But by the 50s, modern art was coming up on its own. Not just in the Philippines, but also in New York. So there was an exhibition of art in America in the Metropolitan Museum, and 18 painters boycotted the exhibition. And the 18 were photographed, and they became the the 18 important American artists. So there was also a similar boycott in Manila. So in 1955, there was an exhibition of the Art Association of the Philippines in the Northern Motors showroom. At some point, of course, I think they planned this, all the conservative people got their paintings off the wall and then they walked out. And they had an exhibition in the street. So what was left in the showroom were all the modern painters and all the conservative, figurative ones went out. So it became a big hit, and many people came to see what this was like. No? So quite interesting that you see what these things are. But we see that in time, the moderns actually won out and got public approval. And you can see that later in Zóbel when he moves from the figurative and goes into pure abstraction. I just want to end by giving you two examples. Sometimes Zóbel worked on his own personal history. So this is the young Fernando Zóbel, no, his father, great-grandfather, and they had a relative called Fermina Montojo, who was the niece of Admiral Montojo, who, if you remember from your history books, was the Spanish admiral who fought in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, against the Americans under George Dewey. Of course, the Spanish lost because the U.S. had really modern boats, and the Spanish, although they had one more, they were 6 against 4. The Americans described the Spanish fleet as floating antiques. So they actually blasted the Spanish fleet down. No? So these are paintings of this is the American fleet, and then the burning Spanish ships on the left. So it is supposedly the greatest American naval victory ever. And so you can see the ships here. I was told that up to around before World War II, you could see the wreckage of the ships, of the Spanish ships off Cavite. But later in the Japanese period, they got it for scrap metal. So if you went, you could still see the remains of the Spanish warships. So again, it was sunk. So when you look at it in the Ayala Museum exhibition, when you look, they just look like any random abstract thing. But when you look at this one, this is actually the Battle of Manila. And it actually looks like those ships that we saw later. So this, and it is homage to a relative, some distant relative, Admiral Montojo. So this is Carlos Quirino and Fernando Zóbel when they were creating the dioramas in the Ayala Museum. When you look at number 33, which is the Battle for Manila, it is not told from the American point of view. It is told from Montojo's point of view. Although he lost, you will see here, it is Montojo's flagship, shortly before they sank. So again, it shows you again how he is playing with history. But also this, in that exhibition, this was the first time this was exhibited. It's called The Christ of Lepanto. And when you look at it, again, it's very simple, but it is actually homage to a painting by Juan Luna, which now hangs in the Senate in Madrid. And when you look at it, so that little line is the leader of the battle. No? So when you look at it again, you see not only a homage to Luna, but you also see, more importantly, it is a dialogue with the painting from the past, with the historical period, put into his own time and his own way of seeing things. So again, it's an important painting that has to be seen in its proper historical context. So, to end, what was Zóbel's legacy? No, he gave us a public collection that informs, educates, and inspires. when you think about it, in 1960, when he donated the collection to the Ateneo, these things were not valuable. They probably laughed at him when he was buying all these paintings, but he created the first Museum of Modern Art in the Philippines in 1960. And when he moved to Spain in 1966, just 6 years later, he established the Museum of Spanish Abstract Art in Cuenca. So two modern art museums created, curated, built by him. So in both ways, he's teaching people how to see. In the Philippines, and that's why I want to publish his writings, his Manila writings, because he was very interested in Filipino color. What makes Philippine art Philippine? What are the elements of Filipino artistic expression? What is it to be truly Filipino? These were the questions he was asking in the 1950s. And it's kind of funny that, 72 years later, he's still asking him or asking ourselves, what have we found? 72 years after Zóbel asked what is Philippine art, we're still asking the same question. And maybe how do we answer that? We just have to learn how to see. And I'd like to think that going through his collection downstairs, you will see how Zóbel forces or actually teaches us to see in different ways. Thank you and good afternoon. Good morning. We have some time for questions.
Questions. Thank you for that. And thank you for encouraging our guests to visit the exhibition.
So actually, the
downstairs if you haven't seen
exhibition
it.
downstairs is the Zóbel collection, but when you go upstairs in the third floor, it's the Ateneo Art Awards, again inspired by Zóbel's ways of seeing. So the Art Awards give us again what things are being made today. So you have both the old and the new all in one building at the same time. Yes, please. Are there any questions?
Like to-
Any comments? Yes, please.
Sir, first of all, thank you very much for that wonderful presentation where it's not just a history lesson or a contemporary art lesson. Actually, sir, I'd like to ask you the same question Zóbel asked in his modern art lesson. In your opinion, Mr. Ocampo, what for you makes art truly Filipino? What visual elements, perhaps? Thank you.
You need 10 doctoral dissertations to answer that and still not get the correct answer. It's very hard. No? So, I mean, when you look, for example, you look at the art of Luna and Hidalgo, what makes it Philippine? There's nothing Philippine in the spoliarium, for example, although there are some people that say it actually foretells the assassination of Ninoy Aquino because there are two dead men there being pulled. So again, you see what you want to see. I guess that's what art is. No? It changes over time. But what makes something Filipino? The easiest answer, it's made by has a Philippine theme. But then again, when you look at abstraction, then it can be anywhere. It can be New York or here. So it's a difficult question, something that until today, I'm still learning how to see, 40 years after first encountering his collection. So Philippine modern art is many things. Its theme, its nationality, its expression. And I'd like to think that I haven't seen the upstairs, but when you go upstairs, maybe you will have an inkling of what that is. I have no real answer, but I'd like to think that sometimes the question is more important than the answer. The process of finding the answer is what keeps us going and keeps us engaged in Philippine art and what we have to see.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Any other? Yes, Mary. Oh my. This.
Mary says, I was here in 1960. I was here as early, I think it is 1960.
Is it working?
when Fernando Zóbel came to our office, Institute of Philippine Culture, which had just been started by Father Frank Lynch in anthropology. And Fernando Zóbel came because of the Kalatagan. This is sort of another aspect, another contribution, which Ambeth has not mentioned simply because he has so much to say about this. But I thought to add to that, the pre-Spanish, what makes a Filipino Filipino, he already was concerned about that because he came and told Father Lynch, who was also saying looking for Philippine culture, what makes a Filipino a Filipino, and anthropologists should not study only indigenous peoples, but the 85% of Filipinos who are, Filipino, and what makes them Filipino. And it's that connection that Fernando came to talk to Father Lynch about, because in Calatagan, the fisher folk, or the people who were making the salt beds at the time, somebody discovered that the ceramics, they would line the salt beds with something concrete. But there they found shards, and somebody reported that. So he came to say, what should we do with this? And he brought some examples. So Father Lynch, and I think maybe they also brought the National Museum into it. That's when they started digging, and they found that the people who were fisher folk who made the salt beds were getting all of these shards from a hillside, and so they began the digs there, and they did find, as what archaeologists do, levels of the evolution of ceramics in the Philippines. So, I mean, that's just and all of those, what they found there, he donated to the Ateneo, and we used it a lot to show students at the time that the early pottery, which they discovered there, had designs. But then once, and many of them are Chinese sources, but once the next period, 18th century, by then, ordinary people were making pots, and so there were no more designs. They were just for use in kitchens here. So it was, and that's the contribution he also made in pre-Spanish knowledge of, what makes a Filipino Filipino.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you go downstairs in the ground floor, there's one little display case with earthenware. So that's 9th, 10th century earthenware. What was found in Calatagan were basically Ming, so that's 16th, 17th century ceramic, and Thai, which actually surprises many people because we know the trade with China, but we don't know that there was trade with Thailand, trade with Vietnam, trade with Cambodia, which is found in the ceramic things. If you also go, Calatagan is now being marketed as a very upscale place for a vacation home. But if you look at the name of Calatagan, it comes from Latag, which means to lay flat. So Calatagan was an ancient burial ground. So if you're going to build your mansion there, just remember what it used to be. So, so this whole thing again. So there's a small museum also in Calatagan that shows part of the thing. So the Zóbels actually funded the expedition. So. National Museum came in, Robert Fox did the Calatagan excavation. So you could see very early in this post-war period, he was looking as far back as he could see to find the essence of what is it to be Filipino. Not just art, what is Philippine, what is Filipino. They're trying to find that identity. And Fernando Zóbel was one of the early people who actually expressly asked the question. Not just to academics, but to artists, and to help us find that elusive thing we call Filipino identity. It goes all the way back, and Mr. Zóbel's really part of that rethinking of where we came from, what we are, and where we want to be.
One more example.
Yes, please.
I cannot resist it because of the Ming. The discovery of the Ming plates and so on. Arturo Luz invited Father Lynch and other artists to dinner at their place, and they used the Ming plates. But what was very clear is he and I guess his wife washed those dishes. They never allowed the household help to wash the dishes. They handled those plates themselves, and everybody ate off, who were in this elite group, ate off the plates, but they were sure that they better not drop anything on them. And that's the story Father Lynch told about that dinner with Arturo Luz, with the Ming plates.
Actually, that's Arturo Luz was probably there, but that's actually the famous dinner of Leandro and Cecilia Locsin. So they ate out of Song Celadon, so even earlier, 10th century. So they had enough to have a dinner service. But again, that was the thing. It was very amazing to eat out of 10th century porcelain. But the funny part was, in the end, Lindy and Cecil Locsin had to wash the things themselves because the yayas might break them. But again, it just shows you again also how much material has been found. And if you talk to people who were collecting before, I mean, little Ming bowls and when you buy something from an antique dealer, they just throw it in. Or I keep telling my students, you go to your lolo and lola's house and you will see they're usually used as ashtrays, or, you forget that they are 600 years old because they were so plentiful. But again, it was also that. I mean, people, fisher folk, farmers were finding this, but it needed that generation to show how important these things and what they actually meant to Philippine history or Philippine prehistory. Yes, please. There's one in the back and then one here.
Hi. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for a great presentation once again, Dr. Ocampo. And thank you for the insights on the visual aspect of learning to see. I just wanted to share one of my observations, and this is broader to the Ayala family. Having lived here for close to a decade and also being through what you would call the critical periods of the country, and based on my work, one of the questions that I got from most of my clients was, what do you see as the future of the Philippines? Especially when we just moved from President Aquino to President Duterte, and everybody was wondering, okay, what's happening with this country? And I would always tell them, hold on. You need to look at the country from the lens of the Ayalas, right? 2016, they tore down the Mandarin Hotel, right? Who tears down a functioning hotel, right? Only for them to build one of the most highly priced real estate property per square meter right now in Makati, right? That's just one aspect. You go to the Intercon, they tore it down only to build one Ayala, but most importantly, to solve a critical problem that even the government was not able to solve, transport.
Transport, yeah.
Remember how that place was horrible, right? And now you cannot even think about, how much convenience they have brought, right? And something else close to my heart, which is energy, right? Something that I call the Ayala magic, which is now that they've gone into the coal power plants where they have gone through with the ADB, and they are getting money to decommission these projects earlier on before their useful economic life, right? So I guess it's something that, I would not want to say that they are a special people, but I think it's a certain way that they look at things that perhaps is also what has been extended to the art, right? And so I always use that Ayala magic or that Ayala, kind of lens to be able to explain to people, if you have doubts about, where the Philippines is going, look at what Ayala is doing and you might get a good view. Thank you.
Yeah, the family, the corporation's almost 200 years old, which shows you that they must be doing something right. There's a Chinese saying that says wealth does not go beyond 3 generations, but this one, it's more than 3 generations. So it's the way in which they run things. And they're very forward thinking. So if you look at their history, they were into transport. We always think of them as malls, and banks and telecom, but they had alcohol. They had alcohol. They had a pharmacy. They had whatever was needed at the time. So again, that's another story. But it shows you again he comes from that family that had a forward way of solving problems which bogged this country down. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for the great lecture. My question is, you mentioned that Zobel had an inkling of travel, and he always made sure he would visit every museum or gallery or whatever's any cultural event he would be interested in, he will attend it. So maybe we can ask you, would you do the same thing to the audience today? Would you recommend that they should do the same thing when they travel?
Well, you should. I mean, I always tell my students that the best way to develop yourself is really from reading, travel, and conversation. These three things, I think, are essential to any person. So, I mean, when you travel, again, it's traveling and the traveler and the tourist are two different things. Now, the tourist just goes to see the sights. A traveler immerses in that culture. And my best example for that is always Jose Rizal. A bit old, but when you look at it, he learned languages. He didn't just go and come back. So we know people. My father on our first trip used to point them out. He says, look at these Americans when we are traveling in Europe. You go to Europe, and then they'll eat in the McDonald's. So they go there, they see the sights, but they are unchanged by their travel. So they go back, and they're almost exactly the same. Unlike people who will go eat the local food, try to talk to people, get more experiences than what the tourist books tell you to do, and you come out differently. So it's a transformative thing, and I think so. It came naturally to him. Well, one, he could afford to go wherever he wanted to go, unlike people like us with more limited means. But again, it's important to be changed by the travel, to be open to new cultures and be changed by it. I think that is what you see when you look at his notebooks and see what it means in his paintings. Yes, please.
I'm just curious, why did Fernando give all his collections to Ateneo instead of to Ayala Museum?
The Ayala Museum was not yet built. It was built in 1974, I think. So it's 8 years later. I'd like to, he probably felt it would go, I mean, even if the Ayalas built a museum, it would, which they have, it's different when you give it to an academic institution. So it was here where he used it to teach art and to teach people how to see. So I guess the museum was not yet there, and I guess when they built the museum, then they regretted why didn't we give it to. But I'd like to think he was already thinking of a museum too. Maybe at the time the family was not interested in doing something like this. So it's one of the lost things. When we were, I'm on the advisory board of the Ayala Museum, and I remember when that new museum was built, one of the first questions Arturo Luz asked, because he was also on the board, was, what collection do we have? And we find out at the time, we did not even have the gold yet. There was no collection. So the big question was, do we buy, or do we just have exhibitions and curate them? So eventually the gold came in, the pottery came in, but for art, it was all here. So one of the things I actually suggested but did not fly was, why don't we just give the Ateneo an storage space that is visible storage. So instead of, we get things from the storage and put it there as part of the Zóbel collection, but again, that did not work. So, but he was that. I think also he just wanted to cut cleanly from the Philippines. So when he went to Spain, why bring all of these things from Manila? He brought a few things, but and then he started buying again there. And when he had collected, left that to Cuenca. So it's part of his personality, I think, to found things and give it to an institution that will keep it alive for after he goes. Again, it's a question we should ask as collectors, what do we do with our things? So mine, I have put most of my stuff, willed most of my stuff here. Yes, please.
If I may add, there were actually 2 attempts before he donated it to Ateneo through Art Association of the Philippines. He was part of the board, and he was hoping an AAP museum could be opened in the mid-1950s. And then after that, it didn't, of course, happen, but he already started discussion for the family corporation, but it, as Ambeth said, it didn't happen. Lindy Locsin actually was interviewed about that, no? So he confirmed. And 2 weekends ago, I was actually in Singapore. I was asked to give a talk about Ateneo Art Gallery, and the curator, Selena Quintas, who was in one of the slides, no, was also with me, and she talked about the Cuenca Museum, the Museum of Spanish Abstract Art. And someone asked the question, why did Zóbel why did he decide to leave his collection here in the Philippines? And we felt that because it has more meaning here, it would not have had the same significance if he brought it to Spain. No, so it's really a very generous gift that he gifted not only to the university but to the country.
Yes, please.
Hi, Sir Ambeth. I'm from batch 2004. So it's been, 21 years since I last heard your lecture. I was your student. So
I
anyways.
hope you passed. So.
I did. You gave me an A.
Wow.
Of course.
That's
I'm
rare.
Hazel Imperial. That's my maiden surname. Okay. So I recently became a visual artist. So I've worked with galleries as well. Leon Gallery International being one of them. So I was late into your lecture. I'm so sorry. But I'm not sure if you tackled how Zóbel, did he move around in the same circles, social circles, with those artists who were not national artists back then? I ask because in my exposure in the current art industry, it takes a village to raise an artist, and it really depends. There's so many artists nowadays, but you get the break if you are supported by the right people or the right gallery. So I'm wondering, Zóbel being Zóbel, even back then, did his support or collecting of these artists who were not national artists back then, did that have an effect sort of, into their careers as, progressing into national artists eventually?
Yeah, I think, well, again, as I mentioned, he had a keen eye. He knew what to buy. He did not buy blindly. And by buying their art, he actually supported them. Because as you remember, they did not really have galleries at the time until, the Philippine Art Gallery and the Luz Gallery, which is also in the 50s. So it's this period, the whole network and marketplace of art is not the same. So you had the conservatives who are doing, that's why it's called Mabini art, because they were all in Mabini art doing touristy things, things to sell, but they weren't really art as we would know them today. So he was there at the beginnings of what would later become an industry, buying things which nobody would probably buy at the time. So, and he focused on Philippine modern art, postwar art. And if you look at it, and you will see it downstairs, what were their concerns? When you look at it, it's poverty, barong-barong, because it shows you a city that was destroyed after the war and was rebuilding. And it's in that context you see the early work. So you look at the the themes that are there. Manansala, Zóbel doing what? Carrozas, Santos, churches, things that go back historical-wise, and then later they start to project forward. So it's a time when they were looking back at the past and deciding where do we go next. And Zóbel was an important voice in that way. He supported the Art Association of the Philippines, supported the galleries by buying things, and it was that patronage that helped many of them. At least they can buy. They by living off their art. And as you can see, many of those painters did not live on their art alone. Luz had a gallery. Ocampo was in advertising. Ocampo and Legazpi were in advertising. Only Amorsolo could live on his art, just doing all these nice maidens. But all of them, the art was always on the side. Just like Zóbel, he had to work in the morning in the corporation and paint in the evening. And his liberation came when he went to Spain and became a full-time artist. But again, Zóbel could be what he wanted to be because of his means. But it was through him, actually, that we see the beginnings. And when you look at it, I mean, those choices, how come he was able to see who would become national artist very, very early, even before the award was created. So it's a way of seeing. The National Artist Award was created 73 when Amorsolo died. So he was the first one given that posthumously, and then they started doing that. So it's 22 decades before. Yes. Okay, we have time for two more, so people can go around, and if people have books, I will sign some books in the back. Yes, please.
Thank you so much for your talk. So you mentioned how Zóbel is in constant dialogue with the past. So you mentioned El Cristo Rey is the Lepanto as a dialogue with Luna's painting of the same event. How would you say now, as modern Filipinos, how can we also be informed by Zóbel's dialoguing with the past in our own conversations now and with our own past?
Well, it's that. I mean, again, as I mentioned earlier, Zóbel's very cerebral. We have to read, we have to see, we have to experience. And unlike Zóbel's time, there's so much available already, not just in books. You see it in YouTube. We have an explosion of material. But unfortunately, today you have to be more critical about what you're looking at. But it is actually consciously going back to the past to see and understand, the present and the future. So Zóbel gives us an idea of how it can be done. We don't have to follow it the same way, but when you look at it, he looks at a 17th century painting and then does an abstract. But it's when you see it, he's not copying it directly. It passes through him, and he makes something old into his own, makes something old contemporary. And we can do that in many ways, not just in terms of art, but in terms of, more importantly, in terms of thinking, in terms of feeling, by drawing from the past and moving forward. One more before we end. There's one more. Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ocampo, for that great talk. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
Not
I
really
think.
good.
There.
Thank you. I had a quick question. Do we have a lot of information about Arturo Luz, for example, and Zóbel and their brushwork? Like, for example, did Luz use the same brush for different colors, and did Zóbel segregate brushes? I don't know if we know anything about their working technique. Just off the cuff, wondering about their technique, their process, and about keeping clean versus dirty brushes.
Yeah. Well, Arturo Luz, that's another lecture because I knew him the last years of his life, so I would always take pictures of the studio. All his materials were not special. They were bought from National Bookstore. So lots of Mongol pencils, no? And I mean, I remember in the beginning when I first met him, he used to brag and say, "I'm the only artist in the Philippines who can draw a straight line." And many years later, when he was already old and could not really do the same things, I saw him using a ruler. And then so I told him, "I thought you're the only artist in the Philippines who can draw a straight line." And then he says, "You know, Ambeth, I learned early in life that the best way to do a straight line is to use a ruler." No, so I would see how he would work. So he had palette was very simple. It was always black, white, red. There's certain colors he will not use. So when I see many of the fake paintings now, you can actually tell, no, if you know. Zóbel also reduced color into just black and white. No? So in that way, they were very similar. But again, it's also in the technique. Luz was very, how would you say this? Very detailed, no? But he would do real detailed small brushwork. But for Zóbel, like those calligraphic things, he used a syringe. So he put ink in a syringe and then draw a line, and then with a brush he would brush the ink, so it creates that very nice different gradations of line and plane. So again, it's something that he actually invented, that whole. So when you go downstairs, you'll see those syringe paintings. So it's actually interesting to watch artists at work and to see how they go about their things. You know? So use of masking tape, for example. So many artists I've talked to say, you know, what was the world like before they invented masking tape? So you could have very clean, you can paint over, and when you take it off, very nice and very clean. So we see that, no? Benka, blues, Zóbel, it's masking tape. So again, the art progresses because of the materials. No? So again, now that we're not just doing painting, there's video, there's all sorts. We have AI now, no? So things are changing, and the art changes again also with the change of material and process. Yes, thank you. One last, if there are no more. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today.
Before, I just wanted, because Ambeth showed the two loose paintings in the old museum. In case you see the black one, it's actually currently with the CCP collection already. I checked, I confirmed it was donated by Fernando Zóbel. So my thinking is when CCP called for donations from artists, he actually asked if he could donate that black and white painting, and we have the white, the city lights,
Cityscapes or yung
and
moon
then
glow.
cityscape ang nandito. So because I had to check, I was worried, why is it here and then now it's with CCP? So yeah, so Zóbel also responded to that call in the early 70s. No? So thank you, Ambeth, and I hope you, when you go around the ground floor gallery, see the exhibition again, you will see it in a different light after this lecture. So maraming salamat. We have, there are books by Ambeth, courtesy of Anvil, no? I had to, just to make sure I got the publisher right. So he can sign the books if you want to buy some copies for yourself. Thank you and good day.